optimize it. So two things that I want you to always remember about electrical current is one is we make it, okay? Unlike this power plant that uses water or something to generate electrical current, internally are making electrical current 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And how we make this, the resources we use to make this are very important to how efficient we are working. Does anybody have any idea what are some things that I need to be able to make electrical current that makes my muscles work, makes my heart work? You know, have you ever looked at an EKG? It's electrical current. EMG on the muscles, that's electrical current. EEG in the brain, electrical current. Where does this all come from? How do I make the electrical current? Anybody got an idea? Unmute yourself and tell me, what do we need to be able to make electricity?
I didn't know this was going to be a quiz. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Water.
What are some things we need? Not a trick question, but what do we need?
Oh, water?
Yeah.
We need water?
Yeah, so we need water. Hydration is super important. And I want you to think about, like, how long could I go without water before I stopped making electrical current and eventually died? And it's not very long, just, a couple days. What else do we need besides water?
Oxygen.
To be able to make electrical current.
Oxygen.
Okay, oxygen. Adam, this is the number one thing on the list, okay, would be oxygen. A couple other things, we're going to get back to oxygen. A couple other things that we need is we definitely need food. The thing about the food is I can actually go a couple weeks without food and my body will still stay alive. So I'd put that at number 4, really. Number 3 would be sleep, okay? We're going to, in lectures coming up, we're going to talk about sleep and look at polysomnographs and all kinds of things. But sleep is so, so important to a patient's health. And when you look at sleep, if you go 7 days without sleep, you go psychotic. By day 13, you will die. Sleep is super important to the health of our making this electrical current. But number 1, Adam said it, is oxygen. 90%. I didn't say 9, I didn't say 19. 90% of the energy, the electrical components of your body that you make comes from oxygen. And how we're breathing is so, so important. We just published an article about 1.5 years ago about breathing and how that affects depression and anxiety when you combine it with neurofeedback. So you take biofeedback, combine it with neurofeedback, you get almost a resonant improvement where it actually is greater than its sum if you pull them together, because breathing is so important to the brain. And that's why stage 1 of everything we do is all about breathing. So we make electrical current, and we're doing that 24/7, which is amazing, 365 days a week, the time we're born to the time we die. It's absolutely incredible how we're the most amazing power plant that exists on the planet, the human body, okay? We don't even think about it, and it's doing it. So the second thing, and this becomes very important to how we're looking at diagnostics and optimizing individuals, is how do we manage the electrical current? So we're making it, but the next thing is I've got to be able to manage it, okay? And a lot of you are familiar with this, but I want to give this to you as a base, because I'm always going to be driving you back to this. How does this reflect what's going on in the autonomic nervous system? Mom is saying this about Billy. What is that telling us about the autonomic nervous system? His heart rate variability is doing this. What's that tell us about the autonomic nervous system? His EEG theta waves are doing this. What's that telling me about the autonomic nervous system? And this is the unique component of really what we do. There's a lot of people out there that have neurofeedback systems that do QEEGs, which are great, sometimes almost so complex that people don't understand what it is they're reading. What we try to do is we try to, in one way, simplify it, but in the other way, give you this massive umbrella or context. And I always have told my staff, our number one thing is regulating the autonomic nervous system. And right now, neurofeedback does a wonderful job of this. So does heart rate variability training.
Hey, Dr. Royer.
Yeah,
I hate to interrupt. Steve just texted me and said you have people waiting to join the call.
I do.
You can't see him. He said he was trying to tell you, but he thinks he's muted on here, and he has people. I don't know. Maybe
I
I'll
have
text him and see if we
9.
can figure it out.
I have 9. Oh, here's one waiting. Got it. That makes
All set.
Got it.
Sorry, whoever was waiting there. Hopefully you're good. And Steve, let me see if I can. I haven't muted Steve, but he can always tell Steve he can text me on my phone if he needs to.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Sorry, guys. So I want you. This is so important. The umbrella for which we do everything is autonomic nervous system regulation. Okay. So when we talk about neurofeedback, great. Heart rate variability, great. Breathing, great. Sleep work, great. Nutrition, all these things are wonderful, but we need to be looking at the umbrella of how is it impacting the autonomic nervous system. And if something else comes along that's better than feedback that moves the autonomic nervous system, we're going to be talking to you about that. Currently, we're giving you the best tools out there to address changing the autonomic nervous system. So let's talk about how this autonomic nervous system works. So the autonomic nervous system is constantly, okay, it's constantly, the ANS is interacting with the environment. Okay, it's looking at the environment at all times, okay? And it's using 5 different things to get information from the environment. Does anybody know what those 5 things that my body uses to get information about the environment? You can either use the chat button down at the bottom on your toolbar, or you can unmute yourself. Does anybody have any idea what are the 5 conduits in to my autonomic nervous system that give me data about my environment? Oh, somebody's got to know. My 5
Your senses?
senses. Good job, Brad. Okay. Is my senses, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, they come through and they give input into the autonomic nervous system. And then based on that, the autonomic nervous system decides, hey, you need to go really, really fast, or you need to go really, really slow. Okay? Now, in the animal kingdom, this is a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay? Whatever's going on in the environment, the animal uses its senses and it drives the autonomic nervous system up or down. So let's look at this picture right here. And second. If I saw this guy, okay, if I saw the lion, my autonomic nervous system, my senses pick it up. What do you think I would do? Do you think my autonomic nervous system would go slow or fast? The answer would be that it would go fast, okay, that my autonomic nervous system would speed up super, super fast. And the zebra, that's what happens to it, okay, is in the environment. If it sees the lion, the senses give it the information, and the autonomic nervous system takes the electrical current it's been making and causes the system to go super, super fast. The thing with the zebra is once the chase is over, then all of a sudden it goes back and it starts recovering. So when it does that, it finds a way to balance it out. In humans, however, sometimes we'll override the senses and we'll use our frontal lobe to think about the past, okay? Or we might be thinking about the future. And we can do that within a few seconds as a human. So I can have some type of particular trauma in my past, and I can be in an environment that's really, really calm and steady. And there's no stress in it. There's no lion there. But my brain acts like there's a lion because of this unresolved past issue. The unresolved past is the present. And so in that individual, they're going to do whatever they can to try to deal with this trauma, which is causing them to go super, super fast, and try to do anything they can to slow down the autonomic nervous system. Okay? So in addictions, you'll see this constantly. Okay? Is there's some type of past event, okay? Or there could be some type of future worry. So an anticipatory stress, I lose my job, right? And now I'm worried about my future. And that overrides my senses. And in so doing, my autonomic nervous system gets super amped up. And now I need to use anything I can to try to slow my system down, okay? And that's a lot of times where we start to self-medicate to try to change the speed of the autonomic nervous system. When you're looking at different disorders, okay, some different things that you might think about. If somebody has a, let's say somebody has a sleep problem and they can't sleep at night, okay? Sleep is really something that is a slow down of the system, but because the person is so amped up, it's extremely difficult to be able to get into sleep. And so they might use something like Ambien, Xanax, something like that to slow the system down because they can't slow down their autonomic nervous system. In the area of something like attention, or let's say depression, okay, where the person's system is now going really, really slow. Now they're going to look at things to try to speed up the system. And sometimes we might use pharmaceuticals that actually do that, try to speed up the system. But what we're dealing with is an underlying imbalance in the autonomic nervous system. And until we fix the imbalance, this will remain as an issue for somebody. Great example is if we go back to the sleep one, okay? So we know that sleep is down here. The person has insomnia because their brain and body is running fast all the time. They go to lay down at night and they can't get into this state, okay? So they go to their doctor and they're given something to slow down the system, an Ambien, a Xanax, whatever that is, to slow it down. And that's helpful, but the next night they're in the same situation where they're going too fast and this insomnia is kicking in again. So now they slow it down again with something that causes a ligand-gated change in the brain, which changes the chemical reaction. And they do that night after night, okay? The problem is that 10 years later, they're still doing the same thing and they haven't addressed why is my system stuck up here in this fast state. The autonomic nervous system is stuck in that fast state. What we're doing, instead of doing what are called chemical or ligand-gated changes in the brain, we're trying to create what are called voltage-gated changes, where the brain actually learns to reside in a different spot, more in the middle or balanced state. And therefore, when it does that, it doesn't need something to move it one direction or the other, okay? And the neat thing that happens here, which you'll see, is that when you start to move here towards the middle, it isn't just a sum of the parts. There's actually a resonance or an increased volume of performance in all kinds of areas that goes up when you bring the autonomic nervous system into balance. It isn't just go, 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 and sleep, 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 sleep. There's a middle spot here. And this is what in sports is referred to as the zone, or a flow state, or a rhythm that the person's in. Okay? Let's move forward. Hopefully that makes sense, but that needs to act as the base of what we're doing. So once we understand that we're trying to analyze, diagnose what's going on in the autonomic nervous system, and those are the tools that we're using with you, Then from there, we want to try to move the autonomic nervous system in a voltage-gated way, not just a ligand-gated or a chemical change. We're not opposed to medicine, but what we want to do is be able to override the system and get at the underlying problem to get that autonomic nervous system in a middle state where it's balanced. We're not going to get into resonant frequencies. When the body gets out of balance and it goes into a parasympathetic state where it's going slow, these kind of things happen across all systems. When it's going fast, okay, in a sympathetic state or fast, these type of reactions happen. And many times, these are kind of things that come in that a patient is talking about that they're having issues with, but we're not thinking beyond that issue to think globally what's driving all of this. And it's the autonomic nervous system. So we want to be always driving back to the autonomic nervous system and understanding how that works. And we're going to talk more about that as we go. But what you have to understand is when the brain does this interaction where it has a real or perceived perception, a real or perceived response to a lion, whether it's a real lion or it's something in their past that's a lion or something in their future that's a lion, the autonomic nervous system is going to go fast and get out of balance. And when it does that, it creates all kinds of problems for the system. So let's just talk about a quick response, how this happens. Brain perceives a stressor. A message gets sent to the hypothalamus because the EEG or the electrical activity has started to go super, super fast. So the message then goes to the hypothalamus, which causes it to release a chemical to your pituitary gland. Then your pituitary gland, after it receives that chemical, it then sends the message to your adrenal glands. And then your adrenal glands pump out adrenaline. Then when that adrenaline comes out, now all of a sudden, your body absorbs 3 times the amount of sugar than it would normally absorb. All this happens by the brain starting to run faster, okay? And then once that happens and that adrenaline gets released, all systems in the body, all 14 systems, now react in either a parasympathetic or a sympathetic way. So when we're doing our diagnostics, we're actually taking snapshots of how the autonomic nervous system is represented in the brain, the neurological system, in the cardiovascular system, in the respiratory system. You all don't have this right now, but down the road, we'll be able to show you how we do that in the endocrine system, the integumentary system, all types of systems to get readings of what is the autonomic nervous system doing. Because once we know that, then we know how to change that, and that's where neurofeedback and biofeedback comes into play. Okay? I'm going to do a quick case study. But before I do, I want to just give you article of the week. Okay? I'm giving you a few different things here. If you would like us to send you the links to these, okay, especially the article and the video of the week, if you go down to your toolbar, there's a chat button, okay? And the chat, you can, with the chat button, you give me your email, and what I can do is I can send you the links to all these things, okay? Back to here, okay? So the ones that we're gonna that we have available is this week. I was featured in the PGA magazine, and actually this is me. This is Bryson DeChambeau, which is he's in the top 10 in the world in golf. This is us at the Memorial out in Philadelphia, and you can kind of see this guy standing there with a computer. That's me looking at Bryson's golf shot. And if you look real closely in this picture, you'll see that Bryson has something attached to his waist. And what he has is the breathing belt that you guys have in your centers. He also has a heart rate monitor on, and he also has an EEG on. So in this article in the PGA magazine, you'll see him talking about, this is him here, just talking about how working with his autonomic nervous system, he's been able to get in a level of performance that he's never been in before. And actually, we just talked about sympathetic and parasympathetic, and in the article, you'll actually read about that. A lot of quotes from me about Royer and oxygen intake and those kind of things. But great little article that I know we're primarily working with clinical people, but I think you'll find this very interesting to read. So that's kind of my article of the week for you guys to, if you want to know what that is. Then my book of the week, and each week I'll give you something different, but Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. I mean, it is, for me, it's been life-changing in how I work with the body. And I've actually been able to meet and spend a little time with Robert Sapolsky, which is a neurobiologist out at Stanford, an incredible guy. The work he's done has been amazing on the adrenals and the autonomic nervous system. Easy read on Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, but is really going to change how you see people and symptoms and behaviors. And then I got an oldie but goodie here, video of the week, which will send you the link on this. This is actually, I was featured on Outside the Lines back in 2007. We have a lot of other ones since then, but I like this one because this is actually a story of an NBA player that was diagnosed, an NBA basketball player, that was diagnosed with ADHD at 2.5. I actually have the IEP. At 2.5 years old, somebody diagnosed him with ADHD, which is an absolute mess to imagine that somebody could do that. By 3, they had him on stimulant medicine, and by the time he was 5, they had him on 3 times the dose of stimulant medicine that somebody should be on. His story is fascinating. We come to find out that unlike the brain that you see in ADHD, where the brain will benefit from speeding up a little bit because the autonomic nervous system is going too slow, his brain actually was representative of more of somebody with an anxiety disorder. So it was a misdiagnosis, and consequently all the medicine they were using was completely wrong. And this video on Outside the Lines, ESPN, talks about how his career was turned around through doing neurofeedback and biofeedback. So I thought you guys might be interested in that, and we'll send that on to you. Okay? Let's finish with a case study. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this up, and so you don't see this chart here, but this is kind of a summary of all the different things that we're going to look at. That's many of those things that you see. Anything in the gray range is what we call optimal. And then the further down, if you look at the bar at the bottom, these are percentile scores. And you can see this individual we're going to look at has some things that are really strong, but then has some things that are kind of medium, and then you'll see some things that are really problematic. Okay, and these things are going to tell us what's going on in her autonomic nervous system. So let's go ahead and look at some of the things that you guys are familiar with. Okay, so you guys should be starting to get familiar with the adult self-report. Your report might look slightly different than this, but the same categories are there. And so what you always need to pay attention to right out of the chute are the adaptive functioning scales. And the best way to look at this is adaptive functioning is what is the person using to cope with stress? Okay, so more like defense mechanisms, and how well are they using those things? So in this case, this is actually a college student. So in this case, the person tends to use, we're looking at T-scores here, so anything that's above this line, this dashed line, is really, really strong. Anything that's kind of in the middle is sort of medium. And then anything that would be really, really low would be problematic. So the adaptive scales are the reverse of what you typically see on the other scales. The other scales, the higher they are, the worse it is. The adaptive ones, the high ones, are showing us how well they cope. So it doesn't take a neuropsychologist to say, oh, wow, this one's a little bit higher, a lot higher than the rest. And we know that this young lady relies on her friends a lot as a way to deal with things, which is good to know. If she was very low, we would know she's having a hard time probably using friends. She's in college, so the spouse partner one is non-existent. The family, okay, how does she use her family? Pretty good. Not as good as her friends. If she has a real problem, she'll probably go to her friends first and then her family. But some people you'll see the reverse. And then other times you'll see, especially with people with some past trauma, those kind of things, that there might be a lot of disruption here. So this is a good place to figure out what is this person's real weakness in their coping mechanisms. This person's not working, so job is out of the picture, but in some of your scales, you'll see that. And then education. So what's the educational environment like? You'll have some students that, man, education's a real good thing for them, and they rely on how good they are, and that's the way that they cope. Right now, I can see, right away, I hope you guys can see this, that this is the lowest of the three, and this person is probably experiencing some stress in the educational arena. Hopefully that makes sense to you. But this is a great way from their report to know what's going on. So now let's go to the clinical scales. So on the clinical scales, again, yours will look slightly different from this, but the same kind of thing. Now we know that we want to look at anything that's high is now a problem. Okay, so in this case, I'm going across a variety of things. And the reason we've used this checklist versus some more maybe less questioned checklist, but only do small buckets like an ADD checklist or a depression checklist, is I want to see everything in a context. So I understand what's going on in the autonomic nervous system. And I don't want to just see it in like one area of the DSM-5. I want to see it across the DSM-5 so I can see what's kind of going up and down. Because many times you could have attention high, like this one is, but then over here is anxiety's here. I need to look at the attention problem in the context of the anxiety. Hopefully that makes sense. So this tool does a wonderful job of seeing, okay, what's going on here? And so right away I can see, oh, this is not good, okay? It's at a T-score of 78. It's up in the 90th percentile. This person is really having some attention issues. I also noticed that this person has some what are called thought problems issues. That means that they're obsessing a little bit more and there's some worrying going on, which that's going to raise a little red flag for me. Like when I get to the EEG, I'm going to wonder, is the autonomic nervous system going too fast? Which would be, to go with the straight ADHD diagnosis, maybe off. Could it be going too fast and that's what's causing the thought problems? Or is it going too slow? But I'm starting to get a picture here of like, oh, okay, there's two things I got to keep my eye on. And then this person seems to have a lot of intrusive kind of behaviors, some impulsive behaviors. So we're going to see when we get to EEG what's going on there, okay? So let's now go down to the last section of the ASR, which is looking at more specific DSM-5 categories. And again, the ADHD symptoms come up. There is some antisocial stuff going on. And a lot of your substance abuse, addiction kind of stuff, you're going to see that this is getting high in many cases. Or you might see that the anxiety is high and they're doing a lot of self-medicating to pull the autonomic nervous system down. But this 81 is off the charts, so I want to keep an eye on that. And then I'm picking up a little bit of depression here. Okay? Let's now go forward to start to look at some more hard data. So here's somebody who, when we look at their breathing and heart rate, and we're going to get more into these down the road here because you need to become experts at understanding these, is the person's respiration rate is 10. Ideally, I want that 6 to 8. Okay. The heart rate is 66, pretty healthy. This person's actually an athlete, which makes sense. And then the stress level in the heart that we're picking up here as we look at the heart rate variability is not bad. I want it to be less than 10, and this person's pretty good. And then coherence, and again, this is going to be a whole talk that we're going to do in a couple of weeks, but coherence has to do with the heart's ability to adapt to stress. The wider that is, the better. So this person's coherence is really good. Ideally, I want it to be above 90. If you were to go to the San Francisco 49ers right now and look up on their board in their brain room, you'd see numbers like 95, 98, 99, 97, and you'd be like, what do those numbers mean? Well, those numbers are their level of coherence. That's what we train in elite athletes, but we also want to train it in the person that comes into our centers because that means we're getting better oxygen. So like Adam said earlier, oxygen is where we get our energy, and this is a really good indicator of how well the person's using their oxygen. And this one's really solid. Okay, let's go to the EEG and we'll finish up there. Yeah. So now we're looking at the thetas and the high betas, and again, this is probably a 3-part talk on EEG. We're not going to do it all today by any means. We're going to spend probably 3 webinars on EEG. But just right out of the chute, kind of a cursory view of this would be the thetas tell me how well the brain can go into a parasympathetic state. Remember, we're always going back to the autonomic nervous system. So thetas give me a good indication of the brain's ability to slow down and recover. And recovery has a lot to do with this in the brain. High beta is a very good indicator of the sympathetic response, the lion chasing. How much, even though this person is fairly stable, how much lion chasing is going on in their brain, okay? And you can have 10 people sitting in the same room, and every one of them has a different high beta ratio because every one brings with them their past and what they're thinking about the future, and their brain, how it responds, is picked up in the high beta, which ultimately affects every organ in the body. So let's look at the parasympathetic readers, thetas. And ideally, I want these thetas to be right around 2.4, okay? So what we see going on in this person's brain is the center of their brain is going a little bit slower than it should, okay? There's too much parasympathetic at the center. But do you see what's going on in the left and the right? Is there's not enough slowing down going on. Again, we have to get into more detail here, which we will down the road, but whenever these recovery numbers get below 2, 1.8, now we're talking about something's going on when this person's sleeping at night that their brain can't recover to make it into through the day. And so that could come out in a lot of different things. And just kind of a little note to take away with you is that when we talk about this is when you look at the ADHD population, over 30% of them have some type of underlying sleep disorder that's going misdiagnosed. And what happens when you give a child or an adult a stimulant is you're going to impact their sleep because it's speeding up the autonomic nervous system. Remember we talked about that earlier? So we want to be really careful that there's not something like this going on under the surface. Like, remember, we saw the ADHD symptoms earlier, but I'd be really concerned about giving her a classic stimulant because these numbers are already too low. The brain's not sleeping well as it is. Fortunately, this person has a lot of plasticity in their brain because the center of her brain has figured out if it goes really, really slow, you remember we saw that over here? It has a way that it can kind of balance out for the two sides. And that's plasticity. The brain has figured that out. So what she's doing is the center of her brain is going 10 miles an hour, and the left and the right are going 200 miles an hour. And so for her, that's a way that the brain balances itself out. And this is a classic example of a misdiagnosis of ADHD, because people will see the 2.87 and they won't see it on the EEG because they're not doing EEGs, but they'll see the symptoms of the 2.87, which is a distraction, the things that we saw earlier. But what they're not realizing is the brain is using that as a way to compensate for the left and the right not being able to get slowed down like they need to. So this person's distraction, inattention, is actually a form of coping for the fact that the left and the right are on fire. And so she just checks out as a way to deal with that. And you see that in a lot of anxiety cases that get misdiagnosed as ADHD. That further gets supported by when we look at the sympathetic response. It tells me how fast the brain is going. And again, you're going to learn a lot more about EEG as we go. Okay, but basic understanding of high beta is this is when the brain is running super fast. These theta waves cycle around 4 cycles a second. These high betas cycle 32 cycles a second. Super, super fast. Ideally, we want those numbers, or the ratio of those numbers, to be less than 1. Okay? Once you get over 1.4, you're starting to rev a little bit too much. You get over 2, you got a major stressor in the brain. And so what am I seeing here? 2.68, off the charts. 2.6, off the charts. The center's okay, but this person's brain is racing so fast that it's impossible for them to focus like they need to. And diagnostically, they might look on the surface as ADHD, but do you think I want to give somebody whose brain is running this fast an amphetamine? The answer would be no. Because if you look at the autonomic nervous system, remember we talked about that earlier. Fast, slow. Okay? Behaviorally, this person is exhibiting attentional symptoms, but it's not because the brain is in a slow state and needs an amphetamine to speed it up. Okay? They're exhibiting the behaviors because the brain is running so fast that they can't slow down enough to do what they need to. The last thing I want to do is give this person a form of a class 2 substance that would speed the brain up. So I need to teach this brain to go in a slower state. Again, we're talking about stuff that we need to delve in deeper, and we're going to focus on these areas moving forward. But this is a great case study of, if we didn't have the EEG, we'd actually get lost in the behavior checklist. And this is what I want to drive you guys to, is be careful to not get stuck on the behaviors without looking at the brain. The brain drives it, but there can be a lot of different reasons why the person has certain behaviors on the surface. And we have to look at the brain to adequately treat the brain, or to treat the symptoms adequately and not create other side effects and problematic things. Okay? Okay. So let's talk, Julie. So you're having a specific question about someone. Okay. And what I would first say is that for a 16-year-old, that this 1.82 over here that you're pointing out is pretty low for a 16-year-old, because our theta actually gets lower as we get older, and it's typically high when we're young, up till about 20. And so in her case, I would be saying, what is going on here? And then your high betas are strong. This person looks like, I would wonder in some ways, are they able to, I was just going to say, is this some type of athlete? And you said an athlete there. So I would want to, in this case, you're going to learn about this in a couple weeks, okay? In a case like this, one is there's something going on in this person's sleep. And then two, I would need to look, we're going to look at the individual frequencies. It is going to be very rare that you're going to see somebody with these low high betas and still displaying anxiety. Okay, just said yes, absolutely a sleep problem. Good job. Okay, so the place I would be going with this person is trying to reset their circadian rhythm, because what you need to understand is on these thetas. Okay, Julie, I'm gonna because we don't have this person's identity, and so I just want to put these up here because this is a great discussion case. Okay, and then we'll kind of take a couple of the questions and be done. Okay, so this person's left theta is 214, center theta is 2.64, and then right theta is 1.82. Okay, so the brain will always push you back to the brain is a super complex thing. Okay, so it's not just put in some numbers, look at some colors, and move on. You have to look at them in context. Okay, so a person like this, where they're having a close to a 0.8 difference between the center and the right. 0.8 would be, I can get you the exact statistical number on that, but it's going to be close to about a 45% difference, okay, which is 45 to 50% difference in the functioning of the theta in different sides of the brain. So what we have here is a lot of asymmetry. And this sometimes can cause even more stress than the high beta. It's kind of like different areas are talking different language. This girl would be better off, or male, I don't know. I think you said girl. This person would be better off actually to have 2 6s across the board, because then everything's kind of running the same speed. But an issue that can cause tension in the brain besides just the high betas is when certain areas are running speeds that are different than the others, which we call asymmetry. Now, she doesn't seem to do this much on the high beta side, but her anxiety and stress and problems with sleep is coming more from the lack of symmetry or the communication with the brain. And because her brain is so calm, she has a very high level of awareness. Unlike somebody like this girl that we have here, who her awareness, she's running so fast from the lion that she's not paying attention to anything. This person does have the ability to pay attention, and she's very aware in some way that something's off, and it's very interesting. I think your 1.82 would be the right. If it is, that is very likely related to a lot of the sleep centers that are housed over there. But interesting case here. I wouldn't get distracted by the 2.64. I would be looking at the 1.82. And I'd love to do a more detailed case study on this person. Okay, so we're running out of time.
Thank you. That was pretty much spot on. And so I'd love to go further into it, but you hit it on the head with the total awareness. And I didn't type any of this in my question, by the way. I should have typed it to everybody. I didn't type anything in the question, but her awareness is insane. But I think she's not recovering. So we have to focus on her recovery. Is that correct?
Yes. And
Yeah.
outside of what Tiger does, and down the road as you get more into the program and we start to really analyze sleep,
Okay.
all these other things available, one of the things I would do for somebody like this is I'd probably get her on some blue light therapy in the morning to reset her circadian rhythm. So a great place to get that is if you go to Amazon and you look for the Philips Go Light Blue, Philips Go Light Blue, or the Philips Energy Light. You need something that's more than 10,000 lumens of blue light. That will help reset her circadian rhythm. Besides just using medicine, that actually would be much more effective than medicine for resetting her circadian rhythm. And her doing that for about 30 minutes, 20 minutes in the morning or 30 would be ideal. Do that for about 10 to 15 days. And I'd say keep doing that. And along with the neurofeedback and the biofeedback, the circadian rhythm is going to start to reset. Now, this is not a webinar on circadian rhythm, but when we get to that, this is a perfect case to discuss how we reset the entire circadian rhythm. But in the meantime, try to get her on some blue light therapy. It doesn't need to be full spectrum therapy, just the spectrum of blue light in the morning, and make sure she's avoiding all blue at night, okay? That's where, based on these numbers, along with the neurofeedback, breathing, heart rate, but that is something I might add to her that I know is outside of kind of what Tiger is kind of talking to me about, but because of this case, that's where I would go, okay? Okay, everybody good? I want to be respectful of your time. We would love comments along the way. And if you can shoot those to us, what was helpful, what wasn't helpful. I'm trying to set the base for you, and then we can get into these things. Or if you need to know other stuff down the road, we'll do that. Okay? Great, guys. Thanks a lot. Everybody have a wonderful day. I will see you next week. 1 o'clock, same time, same channel. Use the same link. You'll be right in here. I can guarantee you in the next 6 weeks, you're going to learn more than most neuropsychologists and physicians out there and related to this kind of thing. So just keep signing on and we'll keep digging.